I'm Caroline Jose Karoki, and I am here to orchestrate the Q&A of the True North film that you have just seen. You're probably still processing what you've just watched. And so we're going to have a conversation. Hopefully, we'll have enough time to cover a few things I have because I have all the questions in the world. And as a filmmaker and an audience member, it was the most amazing thing I've seen in a long time. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Leslie Norville. I am the producer of True North.
And hi, I am Michelle Stevenson, and I am the director of True North, and very happy to be here. Really sad I couldn't be there in person, but really honored to be part of the Hindsight programming.
Now, to start off, I didn't know anything about the history of Canada. I know a lot of people can say the same. When did you first become aware of this event, and at what point did you feel compelled to tell the story yourself?
I think, Leslie, you should tell us the origin story because you brought me in. You kind of brought me into this, and I can say what I knew or what I didn't know about it, if at all. And yeah.
The film True North originated as part of a television series called Black Life Untold Stories. And Michelle and I worked together on one of the episodes called at the time Revolution Remix, and it was a 44-minute episode about this period in time. And we I had known a little bit about this period in Montreal. I'm originally from Canada. I grew up in Canada and went to school in Canada, but this history was also hidden to me. And when I started working on the series is when I got to dig into the history. And yes, as Michelle said, I brought her onto the project, and she had such a really deep connection to the story. And as we were working on the television episode, we realized that there was much more that we could tell than we could in a 44-minute episode. So we decided that we would work on this as a feature-length film.
I was immediately drawn to this particular episode. Leslie had asked me, what was really picking my brain because the series does a whole sort of re-examination of the history of Black life in Canada. What we don't realize, even us being schooled in Canada, I grew up in Canada. I'm originally from Haiti, from the Caribbean, and grew up in the Montreal area and went to school and went to college at McGill University. We were never taught this history. We were never taught about the history of slavery in Canada. We also were convinced of this, not necessarily the myth, but only the small part of Canadian Black life history, which is the Underground Railroad, the one thing that Canada was proud of and wanted to center up against. Sometimes our stories are told in response to, the elephant down the south of the border. And so we kind of hid behind that history. But interestingly enough, I kind of think either the ancestors were calling me to this particular episode because those elders that you saw in the film, they represent my parents' generation. And Philippe and Josette, Philippe specifically, was a close friend, actually a neighbor of my family's back in Haiti. And so there's a personal connection to that story. There were other people we interviewed who I knew very well in Montreal, but never knew about this particular occupation. And I had questions for my parents, questions for extended family members about this once I dug into it. So, yes, our history is hidden, is invisibilized. And I think part of our duty as artists, as storytellers, is to revisit the archive and give it a different interpretation that we can connect to.
Speaking of participants, I know you have to build trust in documentary filmmaking. So, how did you go about deciding how to shape the story with the participants involved?
Well, for the film, we knew that we wanted to, our creative constraint was that this story would only be told, if we were going to use the present, it would only be told by the people who lived the experience of the moment, who either led or didn't have to be leaders in the occupation or in the Conference of Black Rights, but were participants and had vivid memories and recollections of that. We didn't want interventions by experts. And so it was them telling their stories like by the fire and us sort of leaning into and learning them.
Now, let's talk about the filmmaker's dream, which is to have access to archival material as rich as is seen in True North. And the film, I have to say, beautifully, seamlessly blends past and present. Hard to say where archival ends and or contemporary footage begins. It felt so cohesive. Can you talk about accessing and or acquiring the material? Maybe we can learn a few things, but how it affected and informed your approach, including presenting it in black and white as well, which does add a strong emotional dimension. And I know I'm going lengthy with this, but hopefully it'll help construct your thought process. Because usually, you know, with something as recent as 57 years ago to present in black and white, you still need to maintain the story in a meaningful and contemporary way.
In the work that I do sort of as an artist, and if you've seen some of our past work, we really work in collaboration with the editors to build a world, an experiential world that has, in some ways, its own visual language, but that really immerses us as a viewer, as a spectator, into the world. So there's sort of this seamless emotional connection with what we're watching. I mean, that's cinema essentially, right? And so I worked with the editors to really develop a language that was certainly grounded in the interviews and the emotionality of the moments, but also figuring out what can we bring out with the archive, where the archive is not simply illustrative, where the archive is standing on its own. You're in the moment. You could be in 1968 and not even feel the difference, right? So you're in the moment emotionally. So we really dug through material to sort of have that emotional resonance. And then there was this aesthetic sort of abstract approach that felt somewhat like a metaphor. How did we use snow? How did we use, ice? How did we use abstractions that helped with transitions, but also helped us be in the interior minds of our participants. So we felt like we were with them when they were remembering or when they were whatever they were speaking to. So we really worked with the archive as texture as well. So we had these different layers. Our decision for black and white was actually quite a spontaneous one. It's interesting because at one of the first or second interviews that we did, I was standing with the director of photography and telling him how, the archive is really huge and we're really eager to explore it. And he was like, well, why don't we just shoot the interviews in black and white as well? And I was like, yes, it's something, sparked in my sort of creative mind. So that's a great idea. Let's go for it. Let's take that risk. Let's take that leap. And so we lit for that. We did the lighting for black and white. And then we also decided that we would keep everything in 4:3 as well. So we framed in 4:3. We sort of left the option because we wanted to have the option in the edit room if it wasn't going to work, but the framing was done for 4:3. The reason for that, again, is the building of the world, an immersion into the world so that you're never taken out of it, right? You yourself mentioned that, that you felt that you were in it and were not removed. And so we really wanted to have that impression. And then we worked on the archival sonoric sort of 5:1 experience to again reflect some of the archive, but in an audio way, because we used a lot of audio archive as well. Okay, I'll stop there. Maybe Leslie can talk to all of that, the immense work that went behind finding the material.
Yes, absolutely. I have to say our archival team was just absolutely the rock stars of this process. They spent a good year and a half doing research before we even started the process of editing, and it was amazing because there was there's all of this untapped archive that is held by the National Film Board of Canada, Radio Canada, CBC, Bell Media. There's just a treasure trove of material that hadn't been accessed. And a lot of times it hadn't been accessed because people didn't realize that it was there. Some of the archive was just labeled, you know, Les Noirs, which in French means the blacks. So it was just material living in these archives, but it wasn't properly labeled. Our team really did an amazing job of like really diving deep and like pulling that material. So there's a plethora of material that we were able to access to really draw in to create this living portrait of Canada in the 1960s.
And just kind of back to self and to each of you, what during the process surprised you? Something maybe you didn't expect going in, or what about yourself changed, you know, or affirmed in the process? Because documentary filmmakers change the viewer. How did that change you?
Sure. Well, for me, it kind of reaffirmed for me my place in Canada. Growing up in Canada, the question's always like, where are you from? No, like, where are you from really? You can't be from here. And even though I was born and raised there, I always had this very tenuous relationship to the country. And so even though this is not necessarily, a very welcoming story, these are stories of resistance but in a way it kind of like placed me in a larger history. So yeah, for me it reaffirmed my Canadianness and my belonging to the country.
Yeah, no, I agree. I have a different sense, a different relationship to the country. One of our intentions, I think, with the film was an understanding that and wanting to put a stick on the ground and see Canada as this last frontier of the Black Atlantic. So that was really important in terms of the Black lived experience in this hemisphere. And I think for me, what I felt also, in addition to this, change in terms of the sense of belonging, is this deep gratitude for that generation of elders who they really risk their lives on so many fronts. And to be with them for the amount of time that we were with them, and then to spend time in post, screening conversations is really an honor because they continue to be the warriors that they were back then. I mean, they've changed, but their beliefs haven't, and their commitment hasn't. And so it's a deep sense of gratitude that I'm feeling, and also a larger understanding of this legacy of student resistance. These elders that are my elders now, they were between 18 and 26 or 27 at the time. Philippe, I think, was 18 years old during the occupation. Is an understanding that students are our moral compass, right? And that the movements that they begin on the ground, I was part of the anti-apartheid generation, right? The move to divest our universities from investments in South Africa. And so I think it's without really knowing what that legacy meant in terms of student movements, but that there is a legacy there. And I'm deeply appreciative and grateful to be able to share that slice of that sort of global history, really.
Again, thank you and congratulations on this impactful and informative film.
Thank you very much for this opportunity.